All right, let's talk about something that sounds super simple but has a really fascinating answer. If you've got a farm full of oysters or clams or mussels, what in the world do you feed them? Turns out, the answer is kind of hiding in plain sight. And honestly, it might just change how you think about the ocean. Okay, so let's dive right in. When you think about farming pretty much any animal, you picture adding feed, right? We give grain to cows, pellets to fish, but with shellfish farming, the whole playbook gets tossed out the window. Farmers often add, well, nothing, which of course leads to a pretty obvious question. Exactly. I mean, if you're not actually giving them any food, how do these little creatures not only stay alive, but grow into the amazing seafood we all know and love? So that's the big mystery we're going to crack today. Well, the whole secret is packed into their unique biology. Shellfish are what scientists call filter feeders. They don't have to hunt for their food or graze in a field. Their food comes directly to them on what you could call a microscopic invisible conveyor belt. And the process itself, it's just so cool and elegant. So picture this. A shellfish, like an oyster, is just constantly pumping water through its body. Its gills act like this super, super fine net or a sieve that traps all the tiny, tasty particles. That food goes straight to the stomach and clean water gets pushed back out. It's a perfect built-in feeding machine. So, what's on this invisible menu? The number one item is something called phytoplankton, which is really just a fancy word for microscopic plants and algae that are floating all over the place in the water. But hey, they're not picky eaters. They'll also filter out tiny little animals called zooplankton and even something called detritus, which is basically just bits of decaying organic stuff. So think about what this means. If the food is already in the water, then the key to raising healthy shellfish has almost nothing to do with feeding the animal itself. It's all about managing the entire world that it lives in. Yeah, a shellfish farmer is really more of a water quality guru. Their whole success really boils down to three huge things. First, the algal content. Simple question, is there enough food floating around? Second is temperature. Warmer water kicks their metabolism into a higher gear, so they eat more, but if it gets too hot, they get stressed out. And third, salinity. They need that salt level to be just right to stay healthy and keep that feeding pump working smoothly. Now, you might be thinking more algae equals more food, so more is always better, right? Well, not exactly. You can definitely have too much of a good thing. When pollution, like fertilizer runoff, hits the water, it's like dumping rocket fuel on the algae. That can trigger these massive, out-of-control growths called harmful algal blooms, or HABs. And these things are bad news. They can produce toxins that are dangerous for the shellfish and for us. So you can see why a farmer can't just throw some shellfish in the water and hope for the best. They have to be super hands-on. They have to actively manage this whole underwater buffet. And they've got a pretty specific toolkit to make sure their shellfish are getting exactly what they need. What does that look like? Well, for starters, they're constantly monitoring the water, checking those phytoplankton levels. And if the natural supply is a little low, maybe it's just the season or local conditions aren't great, they can't just sit back and wait. They'll actually step in and supplement the diet by adding cultured algae right into the water. And this isn't just about dumping some random green goo in the water. Oh no, they're incredibly specific about it. They cultivate these very particular types of microalgae in tanks, the ones they know are basically superfoods for shellfish, and then add them to the environment. It's a really precise science. But even when they're adding these supplements, it's such a delicate balancing act, because if you add too much, you can cause just as many problems. It can suck all the oxygen out of the water, or even worse, trigger one of those very same harmful algal blooms they're trying so hard to avoid. Okay, so we've been talking about shellfish as if they're all the same, but they're not. Just like animals on land have different habits, so do our filter feeders. So let's meet a few of the diners at this underwater buffet and check out their, let's call them, table manners. First up, we've got the undisputed heavyweight champion of filter feeding, the mighty oyster. To give you a sense of just how powerful these things are, get this. A single adult oyster can filter up to 50 liters of water every single day. That's more than 13 gallons. It's an absolutely incredible feat of natural engineering. And here you can really see how different they all are. Oysters are the powerhouses, no doubt. Mussels, they're a little more chill, a bit slower, but they love it when the water is really dense with plankton. Clams are a whole different story. They're down on the bottom, sifting through whatever settles on the seafloor. And then you have the scallops. These guys are the picky eaters of the group because they can actually swim to find better feeding grounds. How cool is that? Okay, so let's bring all of this home. We started out with that one simple, kind of weird question. How do you feed an animal that you don't actually feed? I think we're finally ready for the farmer's true secret. And here it is. The answer is a bit of a paradox. The secret to feeding shellfish properly has almost nothing to do with the act of feeding them in the way we usually think about it. It's all about a fundamental shift in perspective. It's about becoming a master of their environment. A successful shellfish farmer isn't just a farmer, they're an ecosystem manager, a water quality chef. Their real job is to meticulously cultivate and balance this entire underwater world to create the perfect, self-sustaining buffet for their crop. You know, this whole process is such a powerful example of sustainable aquaculture, working with nature instead of against it. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? As we search for smarter, better ways to feed a growing planet, what other elegant, powerful secrets are still waiting for us, hiding deep in our oceans?
Want to raise healthy shellfish and avoid costly mistakes? Get your copy of How to Raise Shellfish by Gerard in the description box below and discover everything you need to turn your shellfish farming dream into a profitable reality.